a soldier, a child, and a purple backpack left in the rain. Sergeant Ben Walker never expected his patrol to end with a soaked German shepherd barking at a basement door. He never imagined that behind that door was a mother, bound, freezing, and a little girl who hadn't spoken a word until she whispered, "He's the only one who listened." What happened next will shatter your heart and slowly stitch it back together with faith, loyalty, and the quiet power of a dog's love. Before we dive in, tell me, has an animal ever protected you in a way words couldn't? Drop their name in the comments. And if you believe every cry deserves to be heard and every hero deserves a second chance, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to witness might just change the way you see silence forever. The rain had been falling steadily since morning, turning the cracked pavement of Springfield Military Base into a slick canvas of mud and mist. Located on the southeastern edge of Missouri, the base sat like a forgotten relic between pine-covered hills and rust-stained railroads. The overcast sky hung low, almost oppressive, casting everything in a melancholic bluish hue. On the western training grounds, soldiers moved like shadows under the shelter of corrugated steel awnings, their boots splashing through puddles and their breath visible in the cool spring air. Sergeant Ben Walker stepped out of the training field at exactly 16:03. His uniform was damp at the cuffs, his hair darkened by the drizzle, and his face wore the quiet exhaustion of a man who kept more inside than he ever let show. Ben was in his mid-30s, 6 feet tall, with a lean, wiry frame and eyes the color of stormwater, gray, unreadable. His presence was calm, but carried the weight of someone who had seen war and never quite returned from it. The faded scar across his left jawline, just beneath the cheekbone, was the only outward remnant of his last deployment. Since his return 2 years ago, Ben had kept to himself, dutiful, punctual, respected, but never fully present. He walked toward the overnight checkpoint to grab a smoke, his fingers already reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket when he stopped mid-stride. Something unusual lay ahead, right in the middle of the narrow access path between 2 security booths, a child's backpack. It was purple, soaked from the rain, slumped awkwardly like it had been dropped in a hurry. There was no child in sight, no parent running after it. Just that one object, oddly centered, disturbingly still. A young private nearby chuckled. Probably some brat from the housing unit again. Kids keep tossing junk over the fence, thinking it's funny. Ben didn't laugh. There was something wrong. While the others saw mischief, Ben saw precision. The backpack hadn't been flung, it had been placed. He approached slowly. The straps were frayed, the fabric stained with reddish streaks. One long line of dried brown crust trailed across the side, blood, possibly days old. He bent down, lifted it carefully. The weight was wrong, too heavy for just snacks or school supplies. It had heft, a density that suggested something intentional. The rain slicked off the top as he walked it into the security office, nodding to the guard on duty. He didn't wait for permission. In the far corner of the room, under flickering fluorescent lights, Ben set the backpack on the desk. His hands, though calloused and used to firearms, moved gently as he wiped off the mud with a spare cloth. Every motion felt deliberate, like unwrapping a secret. When he unzipped it, the sound was loud in the quiet room. Inside, there was no lunchbox or pencil case. Just 3 items: a thin, battered notebook with a blue plastic cover torn at the edge, a small Ziploc bag containing a stained cloth, and a folded drawing done in colored pencil. Ben opened the notebook first. The handwriting was uneven, slanted, clearly a child's. The first page was waterlogged, but the words still legible. "My name is Lily. I live in house number 23. My mom doesn't act right anymore. Please don't tell him." Ben froze. His fingers tightened around the page, but he didn't flip it. He reached for the Ziploc bag. The cloth inside was stiff, partially dried, with what looked like soaked in blood. No strong smell, but the streaks were unmistakable, like someone had tried to mop up a wound. Then the drawing. A woman lay on the floor, her hair loose, one eye closed. Beside her stood a tall man holding a dark object, maybe a frying pan. The child had drawn crude red lines around the woman's body, not like blood, but like danger, warning. Ben sat still, notebook in one hand, drawing in the other. He knew exactly what he was looking at. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't imagination. This was a cry for help, silent, desperate, and meant to be found by someone who wouldn't ignore it. Then, just as he leaned back in the chair, a soft sound by the door made him turn. It was the shuffle of paws on wet linoleum. A dog stood there, just outside the threshold. A German shepherd, tall and strong but gaunt with age and wear. His fur was a mix of deep black and faded tan, patchy in spots, and his ears twitched like he was listening to something only he could hear. His eyes were deep amber, intelligent but wary, the kind that had seen things humans couldn't explain. The tag around his neck read simply, Duke. No rank, no owner's info. Just the name. Duke was known around the base, an old military dog that had belonged to a soldier who passed 3 years ago. Since then, he had roamed freely, always returning to the same block, Block D, where his master once lived. He wasn't aggressive, but he wasn't exactly friendly either. He kept his distance, chose his people, and refused to stay out no matter how many times security chased him away. Ben had seen him once before, weeks ago, during late-night patrol. Duke had been sitting near the south fence, alert, watching a small figure crouch in the shadow of the trees. A child. A girl with a torn sweatshirt and untied shoes. Before Ben could approach, both had vanished into the dark. That memory surfaced now, unbidden. Ben knelt slightly and opened his hand, palm down. Duke didn't growl, didn't move, just stepped forward slowly, gaze shifting from the bag to Ben's eyes. Then he sat, silent, still, and somehow expectant, as if he had brought Ben here for a reason, as if he already knew. Outside, the rain had started again, light but persistent. It pattered on the window pane like a slow heartbeat. Ben rose, gathered the notebook, the cloth, and the drawing, slid them into a plastic envelope, and tucked it into the inside pocket of his uniform. Duke stood as he did. The dog didn't bark, didn't pull or nudge. He simply turned and walked out the door, pausing once to glance back. Ben didn't hesitate. He followed. The rain had slowed to a whisper by the time Sergeant Ben Walker reached the administrative wing of Springfield Military Base. A damp fog had settled over the compound like a breath held too long, curling under door frames and rising from the gravel paths. The afternoon light was slipping behind heavy clouds, casting the world in monochrome. Duke padded beside him, silent and loyal, his gait steady despite a slight limp in his left leg, an old injury from his working days, as Ben would later learn. Ben's boots echoed down the hallway leading to command, their rhythm sharp and deliberate. He clutched the plastic envelope inside his coat pocket, feeling the stiff edges of the child's notebook and the weight of what it implied. The front desk officer, a lean corporal with messy red hair and an absent gaze, looked up as Ben entered but said nothing. Ben nodded curtly and moved past him toward the inner office where Lieutenant Harris was wrapping up daily paperwork. Lieutenant Adam Harris was in his early 40s, short and stocky with thinning blonde hair and square-framed glasses that slid down his nose whenever he was irritated, which was often. He was known for his exacting approach to rules and his deep-seated skepticism toward anything off protocol. Harris had a background in logistics, not combat, and he liked numbers better than people. When Ben knocked on the doorframe, Harris didn't look up at first. "Walker, if it's about training schedules, send it through the system." "It's not." Ben stepped in, his voice measured but firm. "I found something that needs to be looked at immediately." That made Harris glance up, raising an eyebrow as if he'd already decided he wouldn't take it seriously. "Go on," he said, setting his pen down. Ben laid the plastic envelope on the desk, careful to keep it closed. This was found near the eastern checkpoint. A child's backpack. Inside was this notebook, a blood-stained cloth, and a drawing that suggests, well, abuse. Or worse. "I think it's real." Harris opened the envelope, flipping through the contents with clinical detachment. His eyes scanned the note, House 23. "My mom doesn't act right anymore. Please don't tell him." He looked at the drawing last. Could be a school assignment. Kids make up all kinds of things. Remember that viral hoax with the paper boat in Ohio? He waved the bloodied cloth. This could be anything: ketchup, paint. Without a full test, we're assuming. Ben's jaw tightened. This wasn't dropped. It was placed. Deliberately. Harris leaned back in his chair. And you think someone planted it for you to find? He smirked. You're a soldier, Ben. Not a social worker. Leave it to the local PD if something feels off. Ben didn't argue. He just picked up the envelope and left. He had already anticipated this outcome. Back in the cool mist outside, Duke was waiting near the steps. Ben paused for a moment, watching the dog's ears perk toward a rustle in the trees, as if he were constantly listening for something no one else could hear. Come on, boy, Ben muttered. Let's try someone who still remembers how to care. They crossed the compound to the old medical wing, a squat brick building built in the post-war era with ivy creeping up the windowsills and a flickering overhead light near the back entrance. Inside, the smell of antiseptic clung to the air, but the place felt less sterile than most clinics. That was partly because of Ramirez. Dr. Elias Ramirez had been a combat medic before becoming the base's lead trauma physician. In his late 40s, with warm brown skin, dark curly hair peppered with gray, and a worn leather band around his wrist that he said was from his first rescue mission, Ramirez was a man who carried kindness in his eyes. Unlike most on base, he didn't wear his rank like a shield. He moved with a steady calm and spoke as if everything could be handled, if not now, then eventually. When Ben entered his office, Ramirez was seated behind a cluttered desk, tapping notes into a tablet. He looked up and smiled faintly. If you're here to get that shoulder checked, you're 3 years late. Ben didn't smile. He placed the envelope on the desk. Ramirez's expression sobered instantly. What is it? Ben explained. The backpack. The notebook. The girl. The drawing. Ramirez listened quietly, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. When he opened the ziplock and examined the cloth, his demeanor shifted into full clinical mode. He fetched a UV scanner from the shelf and passed it over the fabric. This is blood, he said. Not animal. Human. And not old. Probably 2 or 3 days at most. He then turned to the notebook, flipping pages gently. This handwriting is consistent with a child's stress response, slanting left, uneven pressure. Look here, see the downward stroke. Hesitant, almost forced. He looked up. She was scared. That much I can say for certain. Ben let out a slow breath. I knew it. Ramirez tapped the table with 2 fingers. You need to get this to base security. They don't care, Ben said flatly. Harris thinks it's a joke. Ramirez rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Then we go around him. Duke, who had been sitting quietly by the doorway, let out a soft whine, drawing Ramirez's attention. I didn't know he was still around, Ramirez said, kneeling to pet Duke. He used to belong to Captain Stokes. After Stokes passed, Duke just stayed. Stayed where? Ben asked. Block D, Ramirez said. Right behind the chapel. Stokes had a daughter, used to visit every summer. Quiet little thing. Curly brown hair. Bit shy, but she loved that dog more than life. One time I saw her crying under the pine trees, and Duke was sitting right beside her like a statue, just watching. Ben's mind clicked. Do you remember her name? Ramirez thought for a moment. Lillian. But we all just called her Lily. Ben sat back slowly, the pieces starting to settle into shape. She's real. More than real, Ramirez said. She might be trying to save someone. The road to Blocky was barely lit, and the fading daylight did little to help. A rough stretch of cracked pavement, half forgotten by the base's maintenance crews, wound its way past the old chapel, a neglected basketball court with rusted hoops, and finally into a row of single-story homes originally built for retired military families. Now only silence and the occasional flicker of porch lights suggested life. Most windows were drawn, most lawns wild and overgrown. It was a part of the base that people pretended didn't exist. Sergeant Ben Walker sat in the passenger seat of an unmarked base utility vehicle, dressed in a faded blue maintenance jacket, clipboard resting on his knee. Ramirez drove with quiet focus, his sleeves rolled up and his badge clipped loosely to the front pocket of his shirt. They were dressed not as soldiers, but as surveyors. Routine infrastructure check, that was the cover. In the back seat, Duke lay curled, eyes alert under half-closed lids. Though no longer active duty, the German shepherd still carried the instincts of a guardian. At nearly 10 years old, Duke's muzzle was dusted with white, his movements slower, but his mind sharp as ever. They reached house 23, just as the wind picked up. The front of the house was flanked by a rotting wooden fence that leaned at odd angles, barely holding itself together. The grass hadn't been cut in months, and a single light bulb above the porch flickered as if debating whether to stay lit. A beat-up utility truck sat rusting in the driveway, its tires half deflated. A child's plastic tricycle, missing its front wheel, was turned on its side near the porch. Ben stepped out first, scanning the house's features with a practiced eye. The windows were covered with newspaper and duct tape. The paint on the siding was peeling in long strips. There was something about the stillness that made the air feel heavier. Ramirez approached the door and knocked 3 times, firm, professional, not aggressive. A minute passed. Then the bolt clicked. The door opened just a few inches, enough for a face to peer out. The man who appeared looked to be in his early 40s, though years of hard living had aged him prematurely. He had a narrow, angular face, unshaven with deep lines carved across his brow. His black hair was greasy and uneven, as if he cut it himself without a mirror. His eyes were pale blue, almost icy, and carried the hollow weight of a man constantly scanning for threat. He wore sweatpants and a stained army green t-shirt, his feet bare on the cracked tile floor inside. "What is this?" he asked, voice gravelly. Ramirez spoke first, his tone casual. "Afternoon, sir. We're from Base Logistics. We're conducting routine infrastructure checks, water pressure, electrical panels, you know the drill. Takes about 10 minutes. The man narrowed his eyes. "This isn't a base housing unit." "True, but it's still within base jurisdiction," Ben added smoothly. "Some properties near the perimeter are overdue for inspection. You'd be surprised what gets overlooked out here." The man looked between them, eyes lingering slightly longer on Ben. Then he glanced past them at Duke, who now stood just behind Ben, ears perked, tail still. "Didn't know they used dogs for water meters," the man muttered. "He's retired," Ben replied evenly. "But he remembers things better than most people." A pause. The man finally opened the door wider and stepped aside, but kept one shoulder angled slightly in the doorway, as if guarding something behind him. "Fine. Just don't take too long." The smell hit them the moment they stepped in, a mix of mildew, unwashed laundry, and something sour. The living room was dim, the blinds shut tight. An old recliner sat facing a dead television. Takeout containers, cigarette butts, and empty beer cans littered the coffee table. The air was stale, like it hadn't been exchanged with the outside world in weeks. Ramirez moved toward the breaker box in the hallway, making notes on his clipboard, while Ben scanned the room subtly. His gaze caught on a framed photo above the mantel, an old military portrait of the man now standing behind them. It looked to be at least 15 years old. Younger. Cleaner. The eyes were the same. "You're ex-military?" Ben asked casually. The man shrugged. "Army. Out a decade now." "What's your name?" "Lucas," he said. "Lucas Brewer." Duke padded into the kitchen area, nose twitching. Lucas eyed the dog, but said nothing. Ben followed, trying to look nonchalant, though every step felt deliberate. The kitchen was in worse condition, dishes crusted with dried food, a broken cabinet door hanging loose. Near the fridge, something caught Ben's eye, a small stuffed rabbit, gray and matted, with one ear torn nearly clean off. It lay beside a bowl of half-spilled cereal, abandoned like a forgotten memory. The same rabbit had been drawn in the child's notebook. Duke moved forward, nose brushing the edge of the floorboard, then let out a low whine. His paw scratched lightly at the edge of a cabinet door that didn't quite sit flush. Ben crouched beside him. There were faint scratches on the floor, long, desperate ones, leading toward the pantry. Duke's nose pressed into the seam where the cabinet met the wall. Lucas appeared suddenly in the doorway, voice sharper this time. "There's no one else here, Sergeant. If that's what you're wondering." Ben straightened slowly, locking eyes with him. I didn't mention anyone else. Silence stretched in the air between them, tight as a tripwire. Lucas blinked once, then scoffed. You people always think you're clever. I told you, there's nothing in this house that needs fixing. You live alone? Ramirez called from the hallway. That's right, Lucas replied without turning his head. No one else here. No kids. No wife. Not anymore. His words were deliberate, calculated. Ben glanced at Duke, who now sat by the base of the stairs, staring at a door near the back of the house. The door was bolted from the outside, the metal latch scratched and slightly rusted. Duke scratched once, lightly, then sat back and looked up at Ben. A signal. Ben made a mark on his clipboard. Water pressure's fine, he said aloud. But the basement access might be a hazard. We'll flag it for review. Lucas folded his arms, jaw tense. I don't need your review. I need you out of my house. Ramirez reappeared, clipboard under arm. We're done here, he said smoothly. Thanks for your time. As they stepped outside, Lucas stood at the doorway, watching them leave. He didn't close the door until they reached the sidewalk. Once back in the truck, Ben let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He said Lily, Ramirez muttered. We never mentioned her name. I noticed, Ben said. And that rabbit. Same as the one from the drawing. Duke barked once, short and sharp, as if to confirm. The sky over Springfield darkened early that evening, as if it, too, had grown tired of pretending everything was normal. The last streaks of burnt orange slipped behind the hills, giving way to a soft indigo hush. Street lamps buzzed faintly along the paths of Veterans Park, their light filtering through branches that had begun shedding their gold and rust-colored leaves. The air smelled of pine, damp earth, and the faint trace of chimney smoke from distant homes. It was the kind of stillness that made you whisper, even if you were alone. Sergeant Ben Walker crossed the footbridge into the park, his boots muffled by fallen leaves. Duke walked ahead of him, his steps deliberate, tail low, ears forward. The German shepherd had grown more alert since they'd left House 23. Something about the air, the scent, or maybe just instinct had him on edge. Ben trusted Duke more than most humans. If the dog believed someone was out here, Ben was sure of it too. At the far end of the park, under a row of oak trees, sat an old wooden bench facing the shallow pond. The light from the nearest lamppost barely reached that far, but it was enough to make out a small figure seated quietly, legs tucked up, head bowed, sweatshirt had pulled tight around her face. Lily Carter. She didn't flinch when Ben approached, didn't look up, didn't run. Duke reached her first, trotting over without hesitation. He placed his head gently in her lap, and she, without a word, rested her small hand on the top of his head. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her body leaned into the dog like she had been holding her breath for days and could finally exhale. Ben stopped a few paces away, not wanting to startle her. You remembered this spot, he said quietly. Lily slowly looked up. Her face was pale, smudged with dirt, and framed by strands of brown hair that clung to her cheeks. Her eyes, large, brown, guarded, held the tiredness of someone who had been awake far too long. She looked no older than 8, but her silence carried the weight of someone twice that age. I didn't know if you'd come, she said softly. Ben stepped forward, then crouched, meeting her at eye level. I came because you asked. You left a message in that backpack. And I listened. Lily nodded faintly but said nothing. Duke licked her wrist, and for the first time, a hint of a smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. Ben waited a beat before speaking again. Can you tell me what happened? What's going on in that house? Lily's eyes darted left and right, then settled back on Ben. Her voice, when it came, was low and shaky. My mom, she's not okay. Not because of her, because of him. He locks her down there. Under the stairs. Behind the metal door. She's not sick, just scared. Who is he? Ben asked gently. Lucas, she whispered. He's not my real dad. He came after Grandpa died. Ben kept his expression still, though his mind burned with fury. And your mom? What's her name? Sarah, Lily said. Sarah Carter. Ben memorized it instantly. She told me if anything happened, I should find someone who wears a uniform. That soldiers protect people, I remembered that. Lily reached into the pocket of her oversized hoodie and pulled out something small, wrapped in a cloth. She unfolded it carefully, one corner at a time, as though it were the last thing that mattered. Inside was a silver necklace, the chain broken near the clasp. The pendant was shaped like a small heart, engraved with faded letters. SC. She wore this all the time, Lily said. Until that night. Ben took the necklace in his hand. It was cold from the night air, light but dense with meaning. He studied it for a moment, then looked back at her. You kept it to remember? No, she said. To prove she's real. Duke nuzzled her arm gently, and she leaned into him. For a long time, no one spoke. The sound of a crow echoed faintly from the treetops. Somewhere nearby, a car drove past, its headlights painting long shadows across the grass. Ben sat beside her on the bench, not close, just enough to make the space feel safe. I need to ask something hard, he said. Do you think your mom is still alive? Lily's hand clenched the edge of her shirt. Yes, she said. Because the last time he left the house, she told me through the crack, don't come back inside until someone comes for us. And I didn't. I've been hiding near the fence. Sometimes I sleep under the porch of the chapel. Sometimes I follow people in uniforms. I was waiting for someone to look. Ben felt his throat tighten. I saw you once. Weeks ago. Lily nodded. I saw you too. But I was scared. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the plastic sleeve with the drawing and notebook. This helped me find you. You were brave. She didn't respond, but the tremble in her shoulders eased slightly. Ben took a deep breath. We're going to get her out. I promise you. Lily turned to him, her voice small. Are you going to call more soldiers? No, Ben said. I'm going to go myself. With help. With a plan. Lily looked down at Duke, still resting his head on her lap. Can he come too? He wouldn't let me go without him, Ben said. A long silence followed. Then Lily stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting too long. She looked at the necklace in Ben's hand. Keep it? She'll recognize it. Ben hesitated. Are you sure? Lily nodded. It's yours now. So you don't forget. Duke stood with her, his tail brushing the leaves. He looked up at Ben, eyes focused and steady, as if saying, it's time. Ben stood and tucked the necklace safely into his pocket. Where will you go now? I have a place, Lily said. But I have to go before he notices I'm gone. He always checks the porch light. Ben crouched again, looked her in the eye. You did the right thing, Lily. You're not alone anymore. Lily gave one small nod, then turned and disappeared into the trees, Duke watching until her shadow vanished between the trunks. Ben stood alone under the fading light, the chain of the necklace cool against his skin. The wind picked up again, scattering leaves at his feet. The park was empty once more. But nothing was the same. Springfield was unnervingly quiet that night. Even the wind held its breath as the base's perimeter lights flickered in and out, casting long, stretched shadows over the abandoned roads that led to Block E. The stars remained hidden behind a layer of smoky clouds, and the moon, half-veiled, hovered like an omen above the old rooftops. The engine of the military transport vehicle barely made a sound as Ramirez pulled it into the narrow alley behind House 23, headlights off, parking beneath the cloak of a collapsed carport 2 doors down. Ben sat beside him, dressed in a utility worker's jumpsuit, no insignia, no rank, just a man with a mission. Duke lay on the floorboard in the back, ears perked, his breathing slow and silent. Though aged, the German shepherd's body was still solid with muscle, his coat thick and dark, his stance alert with the learned stillness of his working days. Ramirez handed Ben a small black satchel containing a flashlight, thermal blanket, antiseptic wipes, and a sealed injector of glucose, just in case. We get in, check the basement, get her out. Quiet, fast, no questions. Ben nodded. No mistakes. They moved as one, slipping across the damp grass toward the rear entrance. The side gate was already ajar. Duke reached it first, pushing it open with his snout and stepping in with a caution that bordered on reverence. On the back porch sat Lily, small, unmoving, a shadow carved from the dark. She was wearing a dark jacket 2 sizes too big and wool socks over her shoes. Her hair was tied in a messy ponytail, and a scrape ran across her chin as if she'd fallen recently. Ben crouched down beside her. "You sure he's not home?" Lily nodded once. "He left 20 minutes ago. I watched him drive off. He usually doesn't come back until really late when he takes that bag." "What bag?" She pointed toward the front room. "Big black one. He always zips it up tight." Ramirez exchanged a quick glance with Ben. Whatever it contained, it wasn't laundry. "You did good," Ben said. "Now stay here with Duke." Duke positioned himself beside her, lying across the porch entry like a living barrier. His eyes glowed faintly from the light spilling out from a half-cracked basement window. Ben and Ramirez stepped into the house. It was darker than before, colder. The lights were off, the air dense with mildew and something else, something sickly sweet. Ben moved first, flashlight beam cutting a clean path toward the hallway. The basement door stood slightly ajar, the latch unhooked. Ramirez reached it first, pulling it open slowly. The hinges creaked like they hadn't moved in years. The stairs descending into the basement were narrow, coated in dust, and flanked by concrete walls streaked with condensation. The air down there was different, wetter, like something had been rotting below the surface of normal life. Ben took the lead, every step a prayer that they wouldn't be too late. At the bottom of the stairs was a steel door, scratched and rusted. A chair sat to the side, and next to it a heavy bolt had been left disengaged. Ben turned the handle. It opened with a whine. What they saw would stay with them forever. The basement was barely more than a concrete box, 10 feet wide, with one barred window high on the far wall. In the far left corner, lying on a threadbare blanket atop the cold cement, was Sarah Carter. She was curled on her side, her hands bound in front of her with a knotted bedsheet. Her wrists were raw, her fingers trembling. She looked impossibly fragile, thin, pale, her once auburn hair tangled and clinging to her face. She wore a sweatshirt and pajama pants both streaked with dirt. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips cracked, and one eye was swollen shut. But the other eye, it opened slowly, blinking against the harsh beam of Ben's flashlight. And in that eye there was something faint, something flickering, recognition, hope, pain. Ben dropped to one knee beside her, checking her pulse. It was faint but present. "Sarah, my name is Ben. I'm here to help." She didn't speak. Her lips moved, but the words wouldn't come. Ramirez knelt on the other side, gently cradling her head as he pressed the glucose injector into her upper arm. "She's dehydrated. Probably hasn't had real food in days. Hypothermic. We need to move her now." From the top of the stairs came a small voice. "Mom?" Lily was standing at the top step, Duke behind her like a silent sentinel. Ben turned toward her. "You should stay back," but she was already moving, careful, silent, slipping down the stairs with the caution of someone who had done it before. When she reached her mother, she fell to her knees, took Sarah's bound hands in her own and whispered, "I'll keep them warm, okay? I'll hold your hands." Sarah's eye fluttered open again, this time fully. Her head turned ever so slightly. "Lily," she croaked. Lily's face lit up, breaking through the fog of her exhaustion. "I'm here. I brought the soldier. I did it." Sarah's lips moved again, and though no one could hear the full words, the shape was unmistakable. "Thank you." Ben and Ramirez worked fast. The blanket became a makeshift stretcher. Sarah was too weak to walk. Ramirez checked her vitals again as they made their way up the stairs, Duke staying behind them like a rear guard. The house remained still, and when they exited into the yard, the wind had picked up again, cool and sharp, as if the world had started breathing once more. They loaded Sarah into the back of the vehicle, Ramirez monitoring her in the rear. Ben climbed in beside Lily and Duke, who refused to leave her side. As the vehicle pulled away from the silent house, Lily leaned against Ben's arm, her voice small but certain. "She's going to be okay now. Right?" Ben looked at the girl beside him, this child who had outlasted monsters, who had spoken with a bravery that many grown men would envy, and gave the only answer that mattered. "Yes, she will." The next morning, Springfield Base rose under a low gray sky, weighed down by a silence too thick to be ordinary. Fog rolled in from the surrounding hills like smoke from a distant fire, swallowing the outlines of the barracks and muting the edges of buildings that had once felt safe. But nothing felt safe anymore. Ben stood inside the small infirmary room where Sarah Carter lay sleeping, her arm hooked to and fore, her chest rising slowly beneath a wool blanket. Her hair had been washed, but her cheeks were still sunken, her wrists still bore the red bands of restraint, and the bruises across her ribs were a map of weeks spent surviving. A nurse moved quietly in the corner, adjusting vitals. Lily sat in a cushioned chair near the window, Duke curled beside her. The dog had not left her side since the rescue. Lily looked tired, but still somehow resolute. Her fingers stroked Duke's fur in slow, methodical movements as if each gesture kept her anchored. "She talked in her sleep last night," she whispered. "Said my name a few times. Asked someone not to close the door. She hesitated. I think she thought she was still down there." Ben crouched beside her. "She'll need time, but you gave her a chance to come back." Lily looked down. "I found something else before she was taken. I wasn't supposed to. I didn't tell anyone yet." Ben's brow furrowed. "What did you find?" She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small metallic USB drive, the kind shaped like a dog tag. It was hidden in her sewing kit. "She told me once, if I don't wake up, you give this to someone who listens." Lily pressed it into Ben's hand. "You listened." Ben examined the drive. There were no markings, no label, just the metal weight of something meant to remain hidden. He looked at Lily. "Do you know what's on it?" She shook her head. "But I think it's important." Later that afternoon, inside a secured admin room behind the supply office, Ben and Ramirez sat in front of an old, beat-up laptop. The screen flickered slightly as Ben plugged in the USB. Duke lay at the door, ears twitching. Ramirez leaned forward, his hands steepled under his chin. They expected documents, photos, maybe even emails. Instead, it was audio, crackling, muffled at first, then a voice, deep, calm, and coated in venom. "You say anything to anyone, you disappear. Just like the last one. You think anyone will care? Out here, there's no cameras. No oversight. Just quiet. Permanent quiet. I'm not mad at you, Sarah. I just need you to understand your place. And that kid? She's leverage. Not family." Ben froze. It was Lucas. Clear, unmistakable. And then another voice, quieter, harder to identify. "You've got a week. Carter doesn't want another complaint showing up in a base report. Clean it, or I'll clean it for you." Ramirez's eyes narrowed. "Did he just say Carter?" Ben nodded slowly. "And not just any Carter. Colonel Dean Carter, head of base oversight." Ramirez exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "That explains why Harris brushed you off. Orders from above." Ben stood, fury simmering beneath his calm. He wasn't just hurting Sarah. He was protected. By someone who's supposed to prevent this. That night, after visiting hours, Duke went missing for 30 minutes. When Ben found him near the wire fence behind the motor pool, the dog was limping slightly, his left flank smeared with blood. He wasn't whining. Just sitting still, eyes alert, head high. A jagged stone, heavy and slick with blood, lay nearby. Ben dropped to his knees beside him. "They came for you, didn't they?" he whispered. "You know too much." Duke licked Ben's hand, then rested his head against Ben's knee. Inside the infirmary, Ramirez wrapped the wound with quiet precision. "Blunt trauma. No deep cuts. He'll walk tomorrow." "They're not just watching us," Ben said. "They're warning us." "I think it's time we stop whispering," Ramirez replied, opening a locked drawer and pulling out a brown folder. "I made copies. Photos, audio, witness logs. I was hoping we wouldn't need them this early." Ben looked at him. "Who do you trust with it?" Ramirez paused. "Captain Marlene Rhodes." Ben blinked. "She's intel. Last I heard, she was being rotated to civilian security policy." "She's more than her post," Ramirez said. "She helped pull 5 women out of an off-grid detention site in Kandahar. Didn't wait for orders. She just moved. She lost her clearance for 6 months. Didn't care." That night, under the cover of pre-dawn shadows, Ben and Ramirez met Captain Rhodes in a civilian vehicle parked beneath the decommissioned helicopter pad. She was tall, sharp-featured, in her early 40s, with short black hair tucked beneath a baseball cap and eyes that scanned everything twice before settling. "What you're carrying could cost me my remaining years in uniform," she said without turning around. "And cost Lily her entire life if we do nothing," Ben replied. Rhodes looked over her shoulder. "I read the name Carter in a few flagged inspection files. I knew something was off, but I couldn't prove it. You just handed me the key." Ramirez passed her the folder. "He's not working alone. Lucas is the hands. Carter is the cover." Rhodes nodded. "You'll hear from me in 48 hours. Until then, don't speak of this. Not even in your own rooms." Ben glanced at her. "You believe us?" She met his gaze. "I've seen monsters wear medals. I believe you." As she disappeared into the fog, Duke raised his head from the back seat and watched her go. For the first time in days, Ben let himself exhale. The abandoned rail yard just outside Springfield lay like a forgotten graveyard under a bruised sky. Rusted boxcars sat crookedly along splintered tracks, their flaking paint whispering stories of war supplies and mail never delivered. Weeds crept between ties and iron, overtaking what time had surrendered. The wind was dry and sharp, laced with the scent of diesel and decay. The perfect place to disappear, or to be buried in silence. Ben gripped the GPS tracker tighter in his gloved hand. The blinking that hadn't moved in over 30 minutes. That in itself was strange. Lucas had been erratic, always moving. He'd been under the radar since Sarah's rescue, but a flagged withdrawal from a local gas station 20 miles north gave them a clue, and Marlene Rhodes had activated a temporary surveillance ping on his burner phone. The signal led here, to a ghost town of steel and memories. Ramirez stayed behind with Sarah and Lily. Sarah had insisted. She was recovering, but not strong enough to face Lucas again. Her eyes, bruised but alert, had fixed on Ben as she whispered, "Make sure he sees the end coming." Duke padded silently ahead of Ben, his paw now bandaged but functional. The scrape from the attack near the fence had left a visible limp, but the shepherd pressed on with quiet determination. His nose twitched with every shift of wind, every ghost of a footprint. Ben wore civilian gear, dark cargo pants, and a canvas jacket over body armor. His service pistol stayed holstered at his side, but his hand never strayed far. He scanned every corner, every broken window and boxcar door. Then Duke stopped. His ears perked, body low. A low, throaty growl vibrated in his chest. Ben followed the line of Duke's gaze. To the far end of the yard stood a partially collapsed maintenance shed, one side burned from what looked like an old fire. The door hung off one hinge. A flash of shadow moved inside. They had found him. Ben advanced slowly, his boots careful over gravel and wood. Duke flanked him without command. As they neared the entrance, a voice emerged, low, almost calm. "Didn't think you'd come alone." Lucas Barrett stood inside the shed, near a metal cabinet, his back half turned. His once regulated buzz cut had grown wild around the ears. His army jacket, unzipped, revealed a black shirt clinging to his sweat-soaked chest. A 9mm pistol dangled from his left hand. Ben didn't draw. "Not yet. You're done running, Lucas." Lucas laughed, a dry, empty sound. "I'm not running. I'm waiting." Ben stepped in slowly, Duke blocking the door behind. "We know everything. The USB. The recordings. Carter's name in your mouth. You're not just abusive. You're a pawn. And your king just got burned." Lucas didn't turn. "Carter's gone. Probably halfway to Virginia by now. And me? I've got nothing left. They pulled my clearance. My accounts are frozen. You think I care anymore?" Ben's voice stayed even. "Then why bring a gun?" Lucas turned slowly now, his face sunken, eyes bloodshot but wild. "Because this ends on my terms. You think you're saving anyone? Sarah was nothing. Just a name. A marriage on paper. You know what gets you back in uniform faster? A stable family. A kid." The photos looked great on a security review. Ben's grip tightened. "Lily's not even yours, is she?" Lucas smirked. "Some guy Sarah used to know. Dead now, far as I could tell. She didn't ask questions. Neither did I. Just needed a prop." At that moment, Duke growled louder, inching forward. Lucas glanced at the dog. You again. Always in the way. He raised the pistol. Ben moved. But not before Duke. With a flash of fur and muscle, Duke lunged forward, striking Lucas's hand just as the gun fired. The shot cracked through the rusted shell of the building, sparking against the metal wall. Lucas screamed, the weapon flying from his hand. Duke landed hard on the floor, but was already up again, teeth bared. Ben had drawn his weapon now. On your knees. Hands behind your head. Lucas stumbled back, clutching his wrist. Blood dripped from his hand, where Duke's teeth had broken skin. His wild energy faded suddenly, and something hollow washed over his features, resignation. He dropped to his knees, breathing ragged. You don't get a medal for this, Walker. You're just a janitor cleaning up the mess. Ben approached slowly, keeping his gun trained. Someone has to. He zip-tied Lucas's hands with a flex cuff from his belt and patted him down for any other weapons. Duke sat nearby, panting heavily, favoring his front leg. Ben turned to him, kneeling. You okay, boy? Duke gave a soft whine and licked Ben's hand. Then he stood, limp and all, and walked over to the fallen pistol, sniffing it once before settling beside it like a statue guarding a relic. Ben radioed it in. Rhodes answered personally. We'll extract in 20. Keep him quiet. Ben sat Lucas against the wall. The man was staring blankly now, all fight gone. Then a voice came softly from behind. Duke! Lily stood outside the doorway, out of breath, Ramirez close behind. She rushed in before Ben could stop her, falling to her knees beside Duke, who perked up instantly at the sound of her voice. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his fur. He's okay, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. He found you, like he always does. Ramirez entered, gave Ben a grim nod. Perimeter's secure. Rhodes is setting up transit to an off-site holding. Ben looked down at Lucas one last time. It's over. Lucas didn't reply. Outside, the sky had cleared. The fog was lifting. Sunlight pierced through the military hospital windows in Springfield for the first time in weeks without the veil of clouds or storm. Winter had finally loosened its grip. Tiny shoots of green peeked from the cracks in the pavement. Birdsong returned like a forgotten song, and laughter echoed faintly from the military park across the street, a signal that life was quietly choosing to begin again. Ben Walker stood before a mirror in a plain dress uniform. The medals freshly pinned to his chest shimmered beneath the fluorescent light. The Airman's Medal for Valor, a Distinguished Service Cross for actions taken beyond the line of duty. He never asked for them. He never imagined earning them by breaking protocol. Yet here they were, symbols of a system that had tried to silence him, now applauding him for the same defiance. He tugged at the collar, uncomfortable as ever in stiff formal wear. You look like someone who accidentally won prom king, Ramirez said, leaning against the doorway with a grin. Ben turned. I feel more like someone who was told to smile for a crime he didn't commit. Ramirez chuckled. Well, good news. Justice showed up fashionably late, but she showed up. Lucas Barrett had been sentenced that morning to 30 years in federal military prison. The court-martial had been swift and brutal once Captain Rhodes handed over the evidence. Multiple charges: unlawful confinement, domestic abuse, threatening a minor, obstruction of justice, and falsified spousal records for military benefit. His expression during sentencing was blank, like even he no longer believed he existed outside a cell. Colonel Dean Carter, once considered an untouchable in the upper echelons of Springfield's command, was now awaiting his own trial, charged with willful suppression of abuse reports, tampering with investigations, and abuse of authority. He hadn't spoken a word in court. No denial, no explanation. Just silence, the same kind he had weaponized against Sarah. And Ben? He had been promoted, formally recognized by the Secretary of the Air Force during a quiet ceremony in D.C. Captain Rhodes had stood beside him, the only one who knew how many quiet moves behind the curtain had made this justice possible. Sarah Carter stood on the edge of the crowd during that same ceremony. She was thinner now, though her posture had grown more steady. Her reddish-brown hair was shorter, shoulder-length, and her skin had regained warmth. The bruises had faded. What remained were scars, small ones near the temple and inner wrists, but none as deep as the ones inside. Now she stood near the fountain at Springfield's Base Park, sunlight warming her jacket, holding a folder tucked under her arm. The patch on the folder read, "Nursing Program Admission Approved." Ben approached her slowly. "I hear they've accepted you early." Sarah turned, her face softer now, more open. "I'll be starting in May. Only part-time for now, but they said I could shadow in trauma cases by summer." "You sure that's not too much?" She smiled, faint but real. "After what I lived through, I think helping others heal is the only thing that makes sense." Ben nodded, gaze drifting to the grassy hill beyond the fountain. There, beneath a young cherry tree, Lily sat in the grass with Duke beside her. She had grown, not in size but in presence. Her shoulders weren't so hunched anymore, her eyes brighter, less darting with fear. Her hair was brushed neatly and pinned on one side with a clip shaped like a butterfly. Duke, meanwhile, had a new collar, a deep navy blue leather band with a silver tag that read, "Duke Protector, Survivor Family." His wound had healed into a faint pink scar beneath the fur, but his gait was strong, and his eyes, ever watchful, never strayed too far from Lily. The two sat in silence, sharing an apple sliced into quarters. Duke sniffed each piece before accepting them, as if politely reviewing her offerings. Ben and Sarah walked toward them. "I can't thank you enough," Sarah said softly. "You already did," Ben replied. "By surviving." They joined Lily, who patted the grass beside her. "He likes this spot," she said. "The sun lands right on his back." "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, sitting beside her daughter. "He deserves that." Ben looked up to the path leading toward the far end of the park, where a white granite building stood. The Springfield Heritage Hall, a place where base history was preserved, from fallen heroes to forgotten victories. Inside, in a new glass case, stood two simple items. A small purple backpack, weather-worn but still zipped shut. And next to it, a silver necklace, delicate, etched with the initials SC beneath them, on a brushed brass plaque, was a quote. "Sometimes a bark in a backpack can save an entire family." Visitors had begun to stop and stare, to ask questions. Not about the medals or commanders, but about the dog, the girl, the soldier who listened. As the sun tilted west and shadows stretched across the green, Duke lay beside Lily, his head on her lap. She stroked behind his ears while he thumped his tail lazily against the grass. "We're safe now, right?" Lily asked, not looking up. Ben nodded. "Yes, and it's spring. The kind where things grow again." "And bloom?" she asked, finally turning toward him. Ben smiled. "Especially that. Some cries for help are never shouted. Some miracles do not come with thunder or blinding light. They arrive in the form of a torn purple backpack, a wounded German shepherd, or a soldier who simply chose to listen. In a world often too loud to hear the quiet ones, it is the silent acts of love that can save a soul. This story is not just about justice, it is about faith. Faith that God never forgets anyone. Not the voiceless child. Not the mother locked in darkness. Not even the stray dog left behind. He can use anyone, a weary soldier, a child with brave eyes, or a loyal dog, to bring light into the shadows. In our everyday lives, we may pass by someone who needs help but does not know how to ask. A door slightly ajar. A look that lingers too long. Do not turn away. You might be the miracle God is sending. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Let them know that kindness still exists, that God is still working, often through the smallest and quietest things. Comment Amen if you believe that Duke and Ben were instruments of God's plan to rescue a family. And if you have ever witnessed a miracle, even a small one, share your story in the comments below. It may be the light someone else needs to keep going. Subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of hope, courage, and divine timing. Because the next one might just change your life. Amen if you believe that miracles still walk among us.